The outer letters drive the inner letters, not the other way around. This is one of the things where sometimes in the industry we've gotten confused, others have gotten confused, maybe even ourselves have gotten confused of what is really our title. And our title is a chief officer with a focus and an emphasis on information security.
Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO.
Welcome, my friends. You know what time it is. Here we go. One more time. Everybody's still in line. Here we go now. Woo woo. It is time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. Eric Cole is in the house. Now, you know, on this podcast, we are all about getting real, getting raw, and telling the truth of what it means to be a chief officer focused on information security. I always switch it up a little bit because we always have to remember the outer letters drive the inner letters, not the other way around. This is one of the things where sometimes in the industry we've gotten confused, others have gotten confused, maybe even ourselves have gotten confused of what is really our title. And our title is a chief officer with a focus and an emphasis on information security. That's why I like to break it out that way. And you know, one of the things I love to do, and we've been doing on the last few episodes, is just asking ourselves questions. And questions are interesting because sometimes simple questions with simple words could have profound impact. And that's why one of the exercises that I always want you to do when you're having conversations with yourself, yes, if you're new, hello, welcome. And one of the things that we do in being a world-class CISO is you get advice from one of the wisest people you'll ever meet. Yourself. I know this is going to sound ironic because I'm a coach and I help people. I'd love to help you. I'd love to work with you. I'm a great coach. Sometimes I'm even an awesome coach. But the most amazing coach you could ever have is yourself. You are full of so much knowledge, so much data, so much information. I crack up these days with AI. I have friends of mine, super smart, super successful folks, and they go, Eric, I get so much done when I actually do brainstorming with ChatGPT. And I'm like, interesting. You know what would even be more powerful? If you actually had a brainstorming session with yourself, because guess what? This connected to the universe blows away. I mean, doesn't even compare to AI. I mean, this connected to the data source of the universe is like the ultimate AI engine on the planet. But here's the crazy part. We are afraid to ask it questions. We would rather go to our iPad, open it up, and don't get me wrong, these apps are great. Nothing against the apps. I use these apps. These apps are powerful tools. But we tend to use them in ways they shouldn't be used. They're a tool to assist us to do research. But they shouldn't be used for idea generation. You need to use Chat Eric Cole or Chat whatever your name is, right? Chat Mary, Chat Adam, whatever your name is, for brainstorming and ideas. But here's the crazy part. We'll sit down and ask a computer a question, and we'll listen to it and take its advice. but we won't take our own advice. It's so crazy. And then it gets even funnier because I've been using some of these AI tools, and to be honest with you, I was not really impressed because I thought they were just out of the box. Now, I should have known because I did AI programming. I built and configured neural networks in the 90s when I worked for the government. So I know that artificial intelligence needs to be trained on data sets, but I guess I assumed that the AI tools that they were giving us were already trained on the data. Right? Bad assumption, because my friends are like, well, do you have your own custom bot? I'm like, what do you mean? Like one of my friends, Bob, he has his own chat GPT bot called Bob. And he's trained it on all his data, so now it can act and think like him. And I was like, okay, so I have to train this. So my friends are showing me how, okay, you have to take all your books, all your blogs, all your papers, all your information, and you need to put it into the program so it can train and learn to think and act like you. And I'm like, isn't that a little silly? My friends are like, what do you mean? I already have all the information here, and I have the best supercomputer on the planet. So why am I taking my knowledge, I'm spending all this time to take my knowledge, to give it to an inferior, because it is not as good as me, inferior technology, so it can pretend to be me, and I can ask the pretend me questions that's pretending to be like me. But I have 24/7 access to the real thing. 24/7 access to the real thing. So why am I not asking me those questions? So that's what we're all about here. Life of a CISO is getting very clear about who you are, what you're doing, where you're going, and for today's topic, why are you here? Now, those 4 words are sort of interesting. And it hit me because I don't know about you, but I jump on a lot of Zoom calls. I have a lot of different calls scheduled. I have a team that actually sort of runs and manages things, and I have an amazing executive assistant that schedules, manages, and sets up everything. So you go to my calendar, everything is scheduled, everything's there, everything's clear. And sometimes I'll get calls, I'll ask them to set up calls, and I don't always give them details. So there's not always a detail there. So I'll jump on a call, and this happened the other day, and I jump on a call, and it was sort of this awkward moment, and I'm like, how can I help you? And the other person said, well, how can I help you? And I'm like, oh, wait. Is this a call for me or for them? Because I'm always so coaching, I'm always assuming I'm there to provide guidance. And then he asked me a simple question. He said 4 words. He goes, Eric, why are you here? And it's funny because sometimes words hit you at different moments and different times. And I'm sitting there and I'm like going through my mind going, like, is he asking like, why am I here on this planet? Mm-hmm. Why am I here in this room? Like, why am I here on the Zoom? It's a really deep question, even though it's composed of only 4 simple words. So then I said, well, I'm here because I think that things have gone too far. We're in a cyber war. People are not aware. Their head is in the sand and they're getting hurt, they're getting damaged. There's fatalities that don't need to happen. And somebody needs to take a stand. I want to dedicate my life to being America's cyber czar so we can protect and secure the internet to turn it back to good because it's now being used for evil. And it was sort of like, whoa, did those words just come out of my mouth? And it was sort of really cool to me that it was the first time I really had clarity around why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I really showing up to work each day? And that's what I want to cover on this podcast. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you here? Why do you want to be a CISO? Why are you showing up to work each day? And it's a weird question, but it's a powerful question, and here's why. It's a question we assume we know the answer to, yet many of us don't. When I'm basically on these podcasts, I'm doing coaching calls. I'm giving you little snippets, little taste of what it's like to work with me and for me to coach you and help you be the best version of yourself, the best human on the planet, the best chief officer focused on information security, or if you're a traditionalist, the best chief information security officer. And I'm just giving you a little tidbit so you can do this on your own. Like if you want to do the slow path and take years to get there, that's great. But I'd also love to work with you one-on-one. Just reach out to me or my team, ecole, E-C-O-L-E, at secure-anchor.com. I'd love to connect with you, see if we make sense to work together, how I can help you. But what it comes down to is, one of the first things I want to get ground truth on is, what is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And like I said, some point we assume that we knew that answer. But the reality is, when I really get down to it, for a lot of people, it comes down to, it was easy, it was safe, it's what their parents wanted them to do, it's what they fell into. A few percent are, I always wanted to protect and secure and solve complex problems, and I felt that CISO was the best way of doing it. But that wasn't the answer that came out with most people. The base original reason was usually something that explains why they're either a little frustrated, a little demotivated, or a little low on energy. Now here's the good news. There's actually many whys. So we just have to find one that fits. Whys are not a one and done. That's the mistake that you see with a lot of the self-help folks, is they think that the why, that you only have one why. There's only one fundamental core reason why you're doing it. So for example, if you became a CISO because it was the highest paying job and you need to provide it for your family, so now you're like, well, I became a CISO for the money, and that's the story you tell yourself, you're never going to be world class. Because here's why. With your skill set, sitting here today, if you really, really only cared about the money, that was true, I bet you we could find a way for you to make a lot more money doing something different. And whether you realize it or not, if you think your why is, I'm only doing this for the money, and that's what you're telling yourself, there's always going to be unneeded stress and frustration in your career, because your mind has already figured out 100 different ways to make more money. So it's like, if you're doing it for the money, this is stupid, because we can do X, Y, or Z and make a lot more money. So there's always a stress factor. Or if you're doing it because your parents wanted you to get into cybersecurity, and you really didn't, but they said it's a great career, it's a growth career, there's plenty of opportunities there. Once again, that's always going to be eating away at you. Your why has to be for something bigger than yourself that gives back. That's ultimately the whys. Now, if you're not there yet, internal whys will get you along the way. Like I said, you can change your whys. But what we need to start off with is, we need to understand what's your current driving incentive for being a CISO. What is the current reason on why you are here? What is the current reason on why you want a business card that says Dr. Eric Cole, Chief Information Security Officer for Company X? Why are you currently doing that? Because until we know the answer to that question, we can't get you on a path to success. Because essentially, if you're feeling a little frustrated, you're feeling like you can't get a job, you feel like this might not be a line of work, you're in an area, because that's when most people come to me. Most people, if things are great and they're on track and they're at cruising altitude and life is amazing and they have all this money and their excitement and joy and everything else, the reality is you probably don't need a coach in this area. But if you're a little frustrated, you're a little concerned, you're a little scared, which is the primary focus of most people, that's where you need a coach. And if you have a stress factor in an area, it's because your why has become an anchor and it dropped to the bottom of the floor. Anchors, just so you know, my company's Secure Anchor, and people don't realize this. Anchors have multiple purposes. Anchors actually stabilize a boat. Do you notice where anchors are strategically placed? An anchor is a very, very heavy piece of metal. And it's strategically placed in the front of the boat. The reason is the front of boats are normally lighter. Well, if you have this big boat and the engines and most of the people and most of the things are in the back of the boat, what's going to happen? It's going to flip up. Right? And that's not good for a boat. You want to keep the front of the boat down. So having an anchor on board, even if it's not dropped, is stabilizing the boat. It actually is putting weight in the front of the boat to even out the boat. Another reason you have anchors is it's a way to stop the boat. Most people think, oh, once we stop, we drop the anchor to stabilize. I just got off a cruise ship, and I love asking questions. What a shocker. And it's funny, and that's how I found out all of this, because we're going into shore, and every excursion, we go to a dock. So we went on a multi-day cruise. We stopped in 4 different locations, and never once did we drop anchor. We always pulled up to a dock, and they tied the boat to the dock. So I asked some of the crew members going, why do you even have an anchor? And that's when I first found out it's to stabilize the front of the boat. Second reason, if you get off course, and let's say something really bad happens, like your rudder gets damaged and the boat is going to crash somewhere, you can actually drop anchor to stop the boat. It will actually drag on the bottom and eventually the boat will come to a halt in a safer manner than crashing into something. So the anchor is actually used for stabilization purposes. But if the anchor is not used correctly, it can also demobilize you and stop you from moving. And that's what I look at whys. A why is like an anchor on the cruise ship. Most of the time, it's sitting there in the front of the boat, and it appears not to be used. But it actually is being used every moment of every day to stabilize you. It's to keep the front down of the boat so you don't flip over. It's actually a stabilizing agent. But what happens sometimes is if you've outgrown the current anchor, if you're basically, your boat's gotten bigger and the anchor is no longer big enough for it, it no longer is aligned, and it falls off the boat, and now you're dragging it along the bottom of the ocean, it'll actually slow you down. It can actually slow you down, and even if it's left long enough and it digs deep enough, even a small anchor, if it digs deep enough into that ocean floor, can eventually stop a huge, huge vessel, and will eventually stop you. So this is why, if you're struggling in any area of your life, but I'm focused on life of a CISO, so we're focused on Chief Information Security Officers. If you're struggling right now, we need to go back and ask yourself, why are you really here? Why are you showing up to work each day? Why do you keep showing up to work each day? I was coaching someone the other day, and they just had one of those days. Like, did you just ever have one of those days where you're like, I am done. I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And I get that. We sort of have a code, sort of like I call it the 911, where it's like an emergency, like, Eric, I need to talk to you now. The place is on fire, I need to talk to you now. And so I get on the phone and they're like, Eric, I'm done. You have no idea what just happened. This is out of control. So I said, okay, where are you right now? They're like, I'm at work. And I'm like, and what time is it there? 2 o'clock. I says, okay. Why are you here right now? And like, I have no idea. I really have no idea. I'm like, great. Let me ask you a question. If you stay in that environment till 5 o'clock, because that's when you usually go home, you stay in that environment for 3 more hours, is there anything productive that's going to happen today? I'm like, no. I'm like, and could things get worse and you say things or do things that could make this escalate out of control? Absolutely. I'm like, leave. They're like, I can't do that. I'm like, why not? Why can't you leave? You just told me you have no idea why you're at work, you have no idea what you're doing, and you don't care if you get fired. And you also just told me that if you stay in that environment, the only possible outcome is things get worse. There's no solution where things get better. So why are you staying there? Go home. Go to a park. Go somewhere else. And it's funny because we are so accustomed to our habits. We are so accustomed to doing what we've always done that when somebody breaks or does a pattern interrupt, like I just did, and I say go home, like they can't comprehend it. Like, I can't do that. I'm like, yes, you can. I said, right now, I want you to put on your coat, pack up your things. Don't tell anybody. You're a big boy, girl. You don't need a permission slip. I want you to get in your car, and I want you to go somewhere where you can just think and we can talk. I go for a park. There's a nice lake. I mean, just find a place where you can just sort of be by yourself and chill and relax, and then you call me back. And here's the crazy part. Most of the time, I don't hear back from them. And the reason is, that's all they needed. They just needed somebody to give them permission to do something different. So what if you gave yourself permission to do something different? What if you gave yourself permission when you're in a stressful situation or you're frustrated, do something different? I love learning from other folks. I love reading biographies and autobiographies. And one of the things I love with Steve Jobs, I love him or hate him, the guy sort of knew what he was doing in a bunch of areas. But one of the things Steve Jobs does, and I do this, is every day when he wakes up in the morning, he's sort of like, how am I feeling? I mean, how am I doing? Am I happy? I'm in a good mood? Am I focused? Or am I frustrated? Or am I aligned? And he goes, and I have a rule of 3. If there's 3 days in a row that I'm frustrated, I then take that afternoon off and I reevaluate and make changes in my life. Because the reality is, if you're unhappy, if you're frustrated for 3 days in a row, you're on a path. And it's going to be 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, and 100 days. So the point is, when do you want to deal with the pain? When do you want to deal with the fire? I used to, when I give keynotes, do a demonstration, but now with all the concerns with hotels, I can't. But I would go in and I would have a pan and I'd have a bunch of paper. And I'd light one of the pieces on fire. And then I would say, okay, what if I detect the fire immediately? What do? I put it out, and literally I can just smack it with my hand, and the flame goes out. So I'm like, so if I detected the fire within 30 seconds, it was quick, it was easy, a little pain. I mean, it stung for a second, but it wasn't really anything long term, and the damage was minimal. But then I said, what if I let it burn for even 5 minutes? And then the whole thing is in flames. Now, there's no way I can put it out with my hand. I mean, I would just get burnt to pieces. Now, I have to get water. It gets a little messy. There's damage. There's impact. So the reality is, if you are not aligned with your why, if your why is no longer serving you, if that anchor has fell off the boat and is dragging on the bottom of the ocean, the longer you wait to fix it, the more time, energy, and pain and effort you're going to have to instill. So the question really is how much pain do you want? I don't care. I mean, I can deal with pain. I'd rather not have it, right? If I can avoid it, I'd rather put my energy and effort to solving new problems than dealing with one that just is dragging on forever and ever. So the cool part is you can reshift. And that's sort of going to be the last part of this podcast. What would be a why that would excite you? What would be a why that would get you up in the morning and be like, here we go? Now, we're not about unicorns and rainbows. I'm not saying every day, but deep down inside most days, it drives and excites you. Now, here's the trick. If you want to get a new anchor, if you want to get a new why of why you're where you're at, why you are here, why you are doing your current job, I want you to initially treat it as a fictional exercise. Fiction. Now, go to the land of unicorns and rainbows, and now ask yourself, just make it up. I'm just make it up. There's no truth to this at all. Wink, wink, wink. There's no truth. But what would be a compelling why? What would be a why that excites me, that gets me going? Once again, totally hypothetically. No reality. And then you're giving yourself permission to really imagine. And then you come up with a why. And then you go, why can't that be true? What if it was true? What if that was my reality? And here's the real kicker. Even though you tricked yourself to thinking it was fictional, you still came up with it, which means it was one of the options. If you came up with it, it was one of the options. And this is one, my friends, that you got to be real careful with. Your why for being a CISO needs to be something that you came up with that serves a greater purpose. Because here's the reality. If somebody else comes up with your why, my job as a coach is not to tell you your why. This is where a lot of coaches fail. A lot of coaches go in and want to give them the answer. And I tell you, it's frustrating. Because if I'm working with you one-on-one and I talk to you, typically within 5 minutes, I know your why. We then work together for 3 months for you to figure it out on your own. Because here's the reality. If I told it to you, you wouldn't believe it or embrace it. It wouldn't be your idea. And it would always be, I'm doing this because Eric told me to. And that will only get you so far. So my goal is to figure out what your why is so I know when we succeeded, and then spend the rest of the days, weeks, and months asking you questions, probing you, giving you data and information so you can figure out and identify what your own why is. So my friends, if you want to take your career to the next level, if you want to be a world-class CISO, let's cut the current anchor It's no longer serving you. Let's come up with a new why, put that anchor on the ship, and let it stabilize and take your life to the next level.